Almost as soon as they began, peace talks between the Syrian opposition and the Bashar al-Assad regime have been suspended. This coincides with a major new offensive near Aleppo. Rebel groups in the area are now cut off from Turkey, which was their main source of weapons and supplies. As Anne Barker reports.
The latest military offensive by Syrian army forces only underlines the impossibility of peace in Syria. In the biggest government assault in months, the Syrian regime, backed by Russia, yesterday broke a 3-year siege by rebel groups in 2 towns in Syria's north. Hundreds of Syrian families have been forced to flee their homes, and there are untold casualties. The US State Department spokesman John Kirby immediately urged Russia to focus not on civilians, but the common enemy Daesh or Islamic State.
Today, we continue to see more Russian airstrikes in and around Aleppo. Strikes not aimed at Daesh, but rather almost exclusively on the opposition. Strikes which, again, have led to reports of civilian casualties, increased displacement of Syrian citizens, and the possible obstruction of humanitarian assistance routes.
All this comes as negotiators in Switzerland were trying to find a political solution to Syria's 5-year civil war. Talks in Geneva, brokered by the UN, were meant to bring the warring sides together, if only in separate rooms. But only a few days after they began, the talks have now been suspended. The UN's special envoy for Syria is Staffan de Mistura.
The UN cannot allow simply procedural matters to actually become more important than actually the result for the humanitarian situation of the Syrian people who have been waiting for us to deliver, this time not a conference, but something concrete for them. I've therefore taken this decision to bring a temporary pause.
Both sides are blaming each other. The Syrian government's chief negotiator, Bashar al-Jafari, says those governments supporting the rebel groups are responsible.
It's a failure of everybody except the government of the Syrian Arab Republic, because we responded positively to the invitation. We arrived on the 29th, on the 28th. Those who have the responsibility of this failure are the Saudis, the Turks and the Qataris. They are the real handlers and masters of the Riyadh group.
Opposition groups in Syria are now demanding an end to airstrikes and sieges on rebel areas before they'll rejoin the talks. The UN says it wants to see humanitarian improvements on the ground, but UN envoy Staffan de Mistura denies the talks have failed and says they'll resume on the 25th of February.
I'm not frustrated. I'm not disappointed. I have been long enough with the UN to know that when you have a 5-year war and have had so many difficult moments, you have to be determined but also realistic.
The Geneva talks coincide with a separate conference in London where donors and governments from all around the world are discussing the humanitarian plight of millions of people in Syria and Iraq. Australia has pledged an extra $25 million in aid along with 10 specialists to work in education, water, sanitation and logistics. Foreign Minister Julie Bishop says despite the continuing violence on the ground, much needs to be done to support longer-term development needs.
Anne Barker reporting.